voted because the box just got signed.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this I'd like to welcome you to this tentative budget meeting this Thursday, July 21st, 2022. Florida Statute 200.065 paren 2 paren E states that the School Board of Sarasota County, Florida will soon consider a budget for 22-23. A public hearing to make a decision on the budget and taxes will be held on July the 26th, 2022, at 1980 Landings Boulevard, Sarasota, Florida. During such discussion, the governing body shall hear comments regarding the proposed millage rate. The general public shall be allowed to speak and to ask questions prior to adoption of any measures by the governing body. The governing body shall adopt its tentative or final millage rate prior to adopting its tentative or final budget. Would you please stand and salute the flag with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point in time, we will move into the presentation of the superintendent's tentative budget and the presentation of the fiscal year 2022-23 tentative budget by our Bonnie Penner, our Chief Financial Officer. Bonnie?
Thank you. So I have just a short PowerPoint for you today to sort of explain the process and let you see where we are in the process and some of the changes that may have been made since the last time we talked about the budget. So as the chairman just mentioned, we have our meeting scheduled. On July 19th, we received the second calculation of the FEFP from the Florida Department of Education. And what they do at this time is they take the revised tax rolls for the entire state and determine what the required local effort needs to be. So I'll explain a little bit more how that impacted Sarasota as we go through there. Of course, today is July 21st, and the purpose of today's meeting is to approve, to advertise the millages and the tentative budget. So this is not actually making a decision on the budget or the millages necessarily. This is approving to advertise them, which you should have in front of you. I've already emailed them to you, but there is also print copies of those budget advertisements. Those will be advertised on Saturday, the 23rd, and then we're required to have our first public hearing on the tentative millage rates and budget between 2 to 5 days after it is advertised, which is why we have some extra meetings on your schedule. After the tentative millage rates and budgets are adopted at the public hearing, we will then have until September 13 to have the another public hearing on the final millage rates and budget. So this tentative meeting that we have on the 26th, what that will do is give us the opportunity to submit and sort of certify these millage rates that we have adopted tentatively at that time, and the county will then use that to create the tax notices to the citizens that own property within the county, and it will announce to them that September 13 we will have our final public hearing.
And we will workshop this budget on our workshop in August, on August 17.
Yes, on August 17th.
Wednesday, August 17th.
Wednesday, August 17th.
We changed some things around today because we had one day that was like 12 hours long. So we will leave the Tuesday the Tuesday board meeting on the 16th as is and move our workshop to the 17th.
Okay, so the millage rates that we will be advertising include a certified millage or a required local effort rate of 3.018 mils with a prior period adjustment of 0.006 mils. So the total required portion of the levy will be 3.024 mils, which is less than what it was the year before. And in fact, it was even less than what we had in the conference report. So it's less than what we had been originally planning for this 22-23 year. Of course, the remaining millage rates remain the same. The referendum millage rate is 1.0 mils, which it continues. The discretionary operating millage of 0.748 is the same as prior year, as is the capital outlay millage of 1.5 mils. So the total millage for Sarasota County Schools will be 6.272 mils, which is down from 6.709 from the prior year. Taxpayers will see a bill of $627.20 per $100,000 of taxable value, which is a decrease to each taxpayer of around $43 per $100,000 in taxable value. Now, the way this flows into the FEFP, and what I've done is just given you a snapshot of a couple of the important pieces of the FEFP. There are some other pieces down towards the bottom that are included in the budget book, but quite honestly, those are the ones that tend to change the most as FES scholarships and some of these other adjustments are made. So this is the primary portion of the FEFP. And what this screen is doing is comparing the 21-22 fourth calculation to the 22-23 second calculation. And you can see we're anticipating additional students, about 800 additional students, and quite honestly, most of those additional we're anticipating to be through scholarship programs. While we do anticipate to see our student population grow, again, we're expecting to see most of this growth in our scholarship programs. You can see that the school taxable value went up from $74.5 billion, am I saying the right one? Yeah, up to almost $95 billion for an increase of $20 billion or 27.05%. And one of the things, if you remember in earlier budget discussions, we were originally budgeting on a 9% increase. So to have it come in at a 27% increase has made a difference. You can see then the required local effort decreased, and that's where the state through the FEFP program determines that because we grew so much in our property values, we need to levy less in order to generate the dollars that the legislature has decided we should be getting for this upcoming year. So the base student allocation for this year went up from $4,372.91 up to $4,587 for almost a $215 increase. That's the most we've had in a very, very long time. We are also benefiting from an increase in the district cost differential. So just for our base allocation, we're seeing about a $15 million increase. Now that includes the growth, so we'll have to see how much of that will stay within Sarasota public schools versus how much will be moved out toward our FES scholarships. But that's almost a 7% increase, which is significant for these base sort of discretionary dollars. This next piece shows the specific, we call them categorical programs that are contained within the FEFP. And you'll see I've got highlighted these first several ones because these are all really set aside for particular programs. While they're beneficial and we appreciate getting these additional dollars, if the light bill goes up or we have to spend more dollars in transportation for fuel, we can't use those dollars to pay for that. So it's important to sort of highlight those and notice that those dollars, again, while they're important and they're helpful to run the school district, they can't be used for our regular increases that we might see. The other ones, you'll see some of them safe schools, and even those dollars are earmarked. We spend far more on safe schools than the $3 million. Therefore, any additional funding that we get for safe schools is helpful to our bottom line because it takes a little bit of that burden off of what we're already, again, spending above and beyond. So those categorical or special programs went up almost $7 million as opposed to the regular that went up a little bit less than that, but the base and these programs went up almost 8%. And like I said, this is only showing you a part of the FEFP, but if you get down to the bottom and look at the calculation, you'll see that we did go up around 8% total. So I wanted to mention, let me go back up too. One of those in blue is down second to last, the teacher lead allocation, and I just wanted to discuss this a little bit. You can see we receive this year we'll be receiving $853,789. Those dollars flow through to teachers. Of course, we give charter schools their portion, but those dollars flow through to teachers to buy classroom supplies for their classrooms. And it truly is, we take the total number of teachers that are on our, that HR has hired by September the 1st, and we divide it into those dollars, and that money goes directly to those teachers. So last year, teachers received $280, and again, it was a direct deposit into their bank account. It's tax-free because they have to provide us receipts to show that they did use the dollars for classroom supplies. And again, these are the dollars that they get to use. Just to make sure, again, we clarify, those dollars have never been used to purchase items from our warehouse. And we're just not set up to do this. In the 22-23 year, we're hoping to roll to a program called Class Wallet, which allows teachers to spend dollars online. It's a portal that has about 30 different vendors, good vendors. So it has Office Depot, it has Scholastic, some real some vendors that teachers are using and schools are using to buy a lot of the materials that they need for their classrooms. So again, in this year, we're hoping to use that. Teachers will get basically like an electronic gift card for their $280 or whatever it happens to be, and they'll get to spend money in this marketplace. And the positive piece about that is they offer some special sales, but they also are able to use our tax-exempt certificate. So right then, they're getting the savings of 7% because they're not having to use the dollars to pay tax if they go to Walmart or if they go to Office Max on their own. Teachers will still be able to get reimbursements, so this will not change that. It just gives them this additional option to where if they do want to shop through the marketplace, they'll have some savings.
Excuse me. I have a question on that. I did follow up with teachers after a discussion on Tuesday, and I was told that, yeah, they could buy things through their office or they'd put the order in, and then their bookkeeper, and I don't know if it was just this school or if that was across the board or maybe this new process you don't have to, but the bookkeeper would say, well, I have to check other vendors to make sure that we couldn't get this at a cheaper rate and get this approved before we put the order in. And she said there was just so much paperwork involved that she often just went out and bought them or whatever. So have teachers been told and have access to this money now to get their classroom started? Because I know they're already buying things for their classroom, which should be opening soon.
Okay, so this is the first part. So there's a second part, and I'll get to that in just a second, which is probably more what you're talking about. The first part,
discretionary, right.
the teacher lead dollars, it's a state allotment, and we're required by law to give that money by the end of September because we have to have counts of teachers by September 1. So teachers that have been hired and are in place by September 1. So we can't determine the amount of money that is going to be available until after that September 1 date. So teachers know this money is out there. It's a program that's been around for years and years. And there are likely teachers out there spending their money, and they would have done that in years past as well. And they're expecting to get the dollars sometime in September. And that has not changed, and we're not.
And they just have to give receipts for reimbursement, correct?
Right. And what we're talking about is if you've already spent the money, you'll just be using the system to get your reimbursement versus giving your receipts and having the bookkeeper at the school or administrative assistant at the school go through them and verify and everything like that. So, but it just gives them an extra option. If they haven't spent their money before September, they can use this as a marketplace. So what you're talking about is pretty typical, where sometimes before teachers leave at the end of the school year, sometime at the beginning of the year, or during the year, teachers are even told you're given a couple $100 out of the discretionary budget. What would you like to have? And then the bookkeeper would facilitate that purchase. And at one time, yes, we did have up until the year before last, the warehouse did exist, and teachers or bookkeepers were able to get a good portion of what a teacher may have asked about or asked for through our warehouse. And yes, I'm sure it was much simpler. However, when the warehouse was tapering off and we were going out of that business because we weren't as successful as Amazon, we notified the schools and gave them the tools in order to be able to go and make those purchases. There were a handful, so not a lot, but a handful of really good vendors that we knew gave good pricing, that were going to also help facilitate purchases in a way that was similar to what the bookkeepers had been used to. Those were rolled out and instructions were given to bookkeepers as to how to do that. So it may have entailed a little bit more of searching, but I think that from what I've read and the emails that were sent to the bookkeepers, it's still a relatively seamless process, and they've been given support in order to buy these things. So, we'll want to make sure we talk to some of the schools and find out a little bit more about what the pushback is.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bridget, do you have a question?
Actually, Mrs. Brown actually asked a lot of them, so I'll be really brief. I just want to make sure. So thank you for asking those, because I think it clarified a couple of things we asked earlier this week. Excuse me, I had a peanut M&M before I knew I was going to talk. But just to be clear, when we talk about the discretionary funds, have we increased that?
We have not. And so that was one of the reasons this is a good thing to discuss, especially at the tentative budget, during this time frame. These are some of the ways that we could help to offset and alleviate a little bit of the inflation. It could either be through offering additional dollars through the teacher lead allocation and giving the teachers, maybe the calculation comes out that from the state portion they get $275. Maybe we round that up to $300 or whatever's decided, and give additional dollars and actually empower the teachers to go out there and buy what they want themselves. Or we could also increase the school discretionary budgets. And again, then it will go to the school, and it will be something then that's facilitated through the principal's office to order, any supplies that are needed. So that's something that can be discussed and a determination can be made.
And I'm sorry, Madam Chair, follow up. And I know we want to get through it, but just to clarify, so the teacher lead, though, is state it's not even pass through. It goes direct deposited to our teachers. Is that right?
It is a pass-through.
Oh, it is
So
pass-
the dollars come to our, in fact, I think we've already got the money. So the money comes and sits in our account, and after that, we can make the count after September 1. We make the count of the teachers and then determine how much those teachers would be given, because we just, we don't hold any back. That money then flows through, but it does come through us. So again, we can choose to add on to that allocation if we would like to. We just can't make it less.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Asplin?
And just one other item is, when you were asking about the wallet, what do we call that?
Class wallet.
Class wallet. Ms. Brown, I know you were asking about class wallet, and that is something that is new, and we are getting that out to the teachers, and it's something that we really would like for them to do because it eliminates the receipt process and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But if we do it, we really want everybody to do it, not just half the people to do it, and so on and so forth. So we're putting that information together to begin the school year so teachers understand what it is.
Okay, so that was just a little aside from the regular budget presentation. So we've talked a lot about the changes in property values. So I just wanted to go through each individual piece of the millage and explain sort of what the impact was of the property value. So again, the original legislative process anticipated a 9% increase in property values, yet our final increase was just over 27%. So the very first and the largest half of the total levy is the required local effort. And as I mentioned, what happens during the second calculation is Department of Education uses the law that says how that will be computed, and they recalculate it. And this is done sort of at a state level, because as a state, they determine what the required local effort is going to be, how much they want to have generated, again, each county by county, or from counties overall, and then they sort of back into what that looks like for each individual school district. So again, in our case, with an increase of over 27%, it really didn't have an impact dollars-wise on the required local effort, because they reduced what we're allowed to levy. So that is one of those where we don't see necessarily an increase because of the tax value or the property values. The voted operating millage, our referendum dollars, absolutely, we see a benefit from the increase. Our new estimate for the referendum dollars is just under $91 million. And we had originally estimated we would get $78 million. So there are additional dollars right now in the budget that have not been appropriated. So those have, just for a better term, those have flown to fund balance, or will roll to fund balance. And even before the property values increased, we had a plan to set aside dollars from the referendum so that we could fund the pre-kindergarten program, which is now being funded through ESSER, as well as summer programs that are currently, have always been funded through the referendum, but for the last couple of years are going through ESSER. So again, we knew we were going to be building a little bit and holding a little bit back from our referendum dollars for those two pieces. Well, we also have coming online 3 schools in the next couple of years, and there are going to be additional costs. Your art and music teachers and some of the guidance counselors and some of the other things that are allocated through the referendum that we will be adding as we add these new schools. So we want to make sure that we are ready for those additional costs when those schools come online. So that's part of what we're doing with the referendum dollars. But again, there are additional dollars that have rolled into fund balance and are available for appropriation. The other piece that we actually see when we see a increase to property values is the discretionary operating millage. It's that 0.748 that we received. Now, again, the original budget, the original FEFP had talked about us receiving a 9% increase because of this. We actually ended up generating, and the 27% gave us an additional $9 million when the new property value was used to calculate that. Now, we've used this because we have had additional costs. We are, same thing, we're setting aside some dollars for additional, we're going to have additional custodians at the new schools, principals, assistant principals, bookkeepers, all of that. So we want to start setting some money aside so that we don't all of a sudden have a huge impact to our budget that we weren't prepared for when those schools open. We've set aside $2.4 million in addition to our regular budget for fuel costs because we know that the cost of diesel has increased significantly. We've increased to add 3 new media specialists at the district level, which is around $300,000. And we're right now working on the estimates for utilities because we know we're seeing them go up, and we're going to need to incorporate that into the budget. It's just at this time we haven't closed out the fiscal year, so we want to make sure we close out and get the best revision to that estimate we can. And then the final, we're working on how to address some of these students in the lower quartiles. So we're having some discussions and we're trying to cost out what those best solutions are and bring that back to you. But that's part of what we want to do with these increased dollars. Of course, the capital outlay millage, we know that can only be used for capital type projects, and the increase in the property values above what we had originally budgeted was an additional $16 million. However, we know that the cost of construction has gone up significantly, and we just aren't sure whether our original estimates are going to hold firm. So we've not necessarily added new projects for capital outlay at this point. We're just trying to see if what we currently have budgeted for the upcoming year, what it's going to take to truly have those projects, and then we will see if we can add new projects based on the capital outlay plan. So that is really what I wanted to go over again today. We're just asking that you approve the advertisements, which include mainly the millage rates, because that is what is legally required to be advertised and then approved so that we can build the budget from those levies and go from there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where are we advertising? Where can the community expect to see that?
That would be in the Sarasota, the Herald Tribune, the Sarasota edition.
Okay. And secondly, I had a question about the executive summary and the line items, school administration, and then there's general administration, and it shows the projected actuals 2021 and 2022, and then the last column is the tentative budget 2022, 2023, and it shows $3,603,420 for 21-22 as projected actuals, and then moving up to $7,677,884. Can you give a little insight on why that jump is there?
So if you look, that is in the special revenue fund. Mm-hmm. And you said that's general administration?
Well, it's under executive summary. It's a very
Right.
First page of the budget book.
Yes, so those are your special revenue funds. Those are our grant dollars. And if you look, the revenues are up from 86 million to 143 million. And that's because the full 2 years of the ARP dollars, of course, we spent some already, but those are budgeted in that 1 year. And that line item that you're looking at is where we collect indirect cost, or where we charge indirect cost to those grants. So that is simply a calculation based on the revenues that we received, and because the revenues have gone up significantly, we're going to be claiming more indirect costs, which then flows into the general fund. Now, Again, the ESSER grants, we're budgeting 2 years in this 1 year. So we won't expect necessarily to recoup all of that in 1 year, but it is part of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Ziegler.
Thank you much. Thank you for walking through that. I have a couple questions. And I know that every year we always have a recalculation after the property appraiser puts out the property valuation. It goes back up to Tallahassee to recalculate the required local effort. Were we delayed more than usual this year?
The Department of Education is required to get it to us by the 19th of July, and they sent it to us by 1 o'clock on the 19th. So they did, I've seen it in past years come on the 16th or the 17th. They're never as early as we would hope for them to be, but they are not required to get it to us any earlier than the 19th.
And those dates are, but if I recall, those are all statutorily written down as far as what dates we meet. Is that correct? What days we have to advertise, which days, like you have a variance of 2+ days or so. But I guess my broader question is, that hasn't changed though, that time frame when we expect Tallahassee to give us that recalculation.
No, it has not.
Okay. And so then my question to General Counsel is, when you think about a hearing, what is the purpose of today from a hearing, from a public standpoint and as a board?
To comply with the statute that was, thank you, to comply with the statute that was referenced at the beginning of this meeting. So it relates to the notice on the budget and advertisement of the millage.
And so in order to, and I know we do this a lot of times with policy, and I've had this conversation in the past. So when we advertise, ideally it's when it's after been workshopped, and I'll get to another piece here, but that it's kind of, we as a board are signing off on, hey, here's our advertisement, here's the budget that we're putting out here, here's also the millage. Some is set in stone, some is actually discretionary for the board to choose, including the discretionary millage and also even the capital, even though there's a maximum on that that can be adjusted. Am I correct in all of that?
Yes.
Okay. So when we do that and we advertise it, is it, usually you think that you're putting it out in the posture that you think it's in its best posture, everyone can sign off on it, feels that we've talked that out, versus putting it out and then saying, then we're going to come back and discuss it. Am I misunderstanding anything?
Well, I think I'm sorry, that's the reason it's a tentative budget. I don't think it's unusual at all to start with your best, your best foot forward, and then you come back and you have the final budget. There are usually changes that happen within that time frame.
Okay. And this is not, I know this is not a direction at you at all by any means. I think that there's a couple different things that are unique about this year, and certainly it was when we got the notification about when our property appraiser put out that notice, it was substantially higher. I know I spoke with you. I know I spoke with the superintendent. It was actually right before we had the vote on impact fees, because I wanted to know how that would impact our amounts, what our capital fund would be, if there would be any changes to it as we consider we're building 3 schools, how much do we need to levy? And this, as you mentioned, I mean, this is a much higher aspect than I think we've seen historically. And then, and again, historically, I believe that we always get kind of a proposed budget book with the details in it, because there's a lot. I mean, we have the fund, the aggregate amount that we put out in the advertisement, but there's a lot of nuances that go into that. And again, unless I'm missing something, and I know I'd sent some emails, we didn't get this until today.
I'm going to find out, if I can here, when the budget book last year, but it's my understanding, and I've looked at the tentative budget books from years past, they cannot pull this together until they get that second calculation. So if you got it before that, there was a different set of dates. When the 19th comes makes a big difference in what we would do. Now, yeah, I think that there are some districts who are likely having their public hearing a week later. so that they've got a little bit more time, but for some reason, these dates were set and we're actually a little bit earlier. So, it just is kind of a matter of when the 19th falls, when the weekend, where is that in proximity to a weekend? And when then, if we advertise, which I think normally we try to advertise on a Saturday, then so we can have the hearing on a normal Tuesday, which is an expected board meeting date. When can that happen and still come into compliance with the trim, which is really a timetable?
Right. No, and I remember, and that's why I wanted to highlight from the general counsel standpoint. But there is very specific rules under trim and the statute that was referenced. I just think in my position here, it's a bit challenging. It's in particular because we did know we were likely going to have a substantial difference of funding based on July 1st release of property valuation. I think that was expected. What we knew that would be wasn't maybe precise, but where I find I'm challenged is, approving particularly the millage for approval for advertising. And again, without having a deeper discussion, including and being able to really drill down, I look at this discretionary and in particular also the capital, that there may not be any adjustments. I'm not saying we would, but we don't have that opportunity to have that discussion. I think that's an important part from the informed, what we're asked to do. So, and I know that was mentioned at the top here that we're going to have a workshop in August. And again, if I'm missing something, but historically, we have those workshops leading up to this date. Again, they're proposed. We don't have that final calculation. I remember getting old. In the past, we get sheets that would update it, and then you'd enter it in, and it would readjust. And so I feel, again, that's why I wanted from a historical standpoint, it's challenging to say, here, I'm putting my stamp of approval to approve the advertisement of these millage rates without a deeper discussion as a board on what, especially when you just went over the high-level revenues, which is exciting. We should celebrate. I mean, look, we're getting more money, but I also think there's a responsibility as a taxing authority that we evaluate that increase of revenue against what we're levying from a tax. Is that an accurate statement, Dr. Asplin? I don't know if you have any comments, because I know I've come back and forth with you.
Well, I have a comment. Page 3 of the executive summary, Bridget, is the list of where we're working through in terms of plan, develop, adopt, and amend. This is the first budget book we get. We'll get several other budget books as we go through approving this, and it's updated. In years past, we would have a major portion of every workshop would be half an hour to an hour on the budget. And we did not do that every time because we were looking at the strategic plan. We didn't do that every meeting this year. But we have had one-on-ones with the superintendent recently where we've talked about the budget. And so what we are looking at is these things don't reflect things that we would approve. The property appraisers, certified tax rolls, and what the state has told us in the second calculation that we will be using. These are things that we don't determine, that are determined for us. So this advertising that we will be doing on Saturday reflect those, and then the finite portions of that we can still refine as we see fit as we go forward with this budget approval through the month of September. Okay. Mrs. Brown?
I'm sorry, I wasn't done. So, because I was asking the superintendent a question. So when it comes down to the millage rates and we're advertising them, so, and I've been on the board for a while, so I'm familiar with the budget process. It is, now we're advertising it and you're saying that we would hypothetically change the millage rates?
No, we don't.
That's what my point was.
No, we don't.
But we have discretionary taxing authority in two areas, which is discretionary operating and the capital, which is a maximum of 1.5. Am I incorrect?
No, you're not.
So when we go to advertise, we are putting forward to the community and then asking for them to come back on Tuesday to hear from the public. I mean, we have a hearing of citizens today, and I don't know what they possibly what input they would provide, because I don't think we have much to put forward, and that is unusual. So that's where I'm saying that's why I wanted to go through that time process in particular, because we have and historically, we didn't necessarily have this much of a lift. But we are in a very different position, and we are very limited on information and in fact, time because of the statutorial aspect. So my question to the superintendent, what discussions do you foresee us having as a board with this new information from now until, I mean, Tuesday is essentially when we're putting it out there. Am I?
Well, I know that with the workshops that we've had, and there have been many items on our workshops, and that was part of the reason why I had the one-on-ones with the CFO meeting with each board member to go through this as to what we think it's going to be. The next workshop that's coming up in August, that's when we can delve into it more and talk about it some more. The 1.5 capital outlay, you know, it's been that way for, I mean, every district has 1.5, and you can vote to have that a little bit lower. But at the same time, if I'm correct, the tax appraiser thought that it would be more in the 10% range, and just recently came back with the 20% increase. So last week we didn't even know that.
I thought it was July 1st that was released.
It did move from 10 to 24 or
24.
24. He gave us that in early June, and that's when we had the discussion, because we had the one-on-ones after that and discussed, because of that, then when it came back in on July 1, it was actually at 27.
And that's and in the one-on-ones, that's when I discussed that there's a possibility of us, you know, hiring more folks in our Title I schools to help us with the lower quartile. If you recall, we had that conversation because we thought that we would be getting more dollars. And that's why that piece was in the PowerPoint. You know, between now and next week, if you want to get together and meet one-on-one and talk about it, we can certainly do that.
One more follow-up and I'll be done. I remember the one-on-ones, and I know we talked about the moving to the 3 schools. I raised this issue because I wanted to focus on the lower quartile. I still have those notes. And I know we were focusing on being cautious with it, as Mrs. Penner mentioned. It's Mrs., not Doctor. I don't want it.
No.
Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure. And that, but I had addressed the aspect of, you know, allocating an earmark funding for the lower quartile specifically. And then I know we recalled to have a discussion with the ESSER, and then coming with the 3 schools and being cautious with the administrative aspect and hiring up. So being smart and planning. But as a board, we've never had that discussion. So at the last meeting is why I said I'd like to. I don't know when else we would do that. And those things do adjust and they make a difference. But you know, I think it's a little different than I've seen before. And again, because we knew coming in we are going to have a substantially more revenue, I feel like it's hard for us as a board, and almost in a disservice to the community, to not have it. I don't want to do things one-on-one all the time when it's our responsibility collectively as a board to make these decisions. And so I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight that. I do think it is. I think it's a disservice to the community.
It is not a disservice to the community.
Madam Chair, I'm not done with my statements, and you can chime in any time when I'm completed. But I think it is. No, I do believe it is. We have a very generous community, and I want to make sure that they understand. So we have a referendum that's bringing additional dollars. And again, when I asked about the levying of the taxes, we haven't really had a conversation as a board to understand, even at a proposed high level, what that revenue would do. And I think, yes, one-on-ones are beneficial to have that discussion, but we as a board have not done that and have not had any sense of whether this levying is the right way to go, and now we're advertising it. And I think that's a bit of a disservice. And that is my personal opinion as a board member.
Mrs. Brown.
I guess I have a different memory of how these things worked out. And on page 3, again, it talks about but I remember during the legislative session, we were talking about, this is what the governor proposed. This is what the House proposed. This is what the Senate proposed. This is how it changes from where we are right now. And these are how we're going to use our dollars. And we as a board made a decision on how we were going to spend some of these dollars proposed on the proposed budgets. And we had to do that back in, I believe it was March and April, so we could get the staffing levels. And if you go to the agendas of these meetings on May 10th, I mean, we had a big discussion about the budget, and this was the budget we were talking about. And we knew when we were discussing those that there were going to be some increases in the property values. We didn't know how much, but now that we know them, and we've been discussing, I believe we've been talking about what our priorities are when we were talking about the our strategic plan. And I don't think that we just got these numbers that we should, decide how those dollars are going to be used. It says right here, we've got an increase of $12.9 million about in the voted millage, and 12.9 million, give or take, in the voting millage. And it says we're going to set these funds aside for the new schools and for one of those strategic plans that we have about the pre-K programs and some of the other things that we're looking at in the summer programs. It hasn't been decided yet, but every year, we've never had this much that we've had to come back to, but the decision isn't being made yet. It's saying we're putting these here, and I would think before those dollars get allocated, there would have to be a budget amendment by the board in order to do that. And the discretionary operating millage is again, increased by about $9 million. But I have a question for you, and that's the calculation on the capital millage. The operating millage, the voted operating millage is 1.0. And the discretionary millage is 0.748. I would think that the discretionary operating millage at 0.748 should be about half of the increase of the 1.5, or about 1.5 of the operating millage. So the 16 million seems about $3.5 million short. So if you would go back and look at that, because I'm thinking capital dollars are a little short the increase that we're showing here.
That's purposeful. And part of what the difficulty is in explaining some of this is because when we originally built the budget, we thought that the taxes were going to increase by the 9%. So that was already figured out. So what I was doing in some of this is saying, okay, we've already budgeted and shown and talked about that happened with the 9%. So this is the remaining piece. This is what the unforeseen was when we finally got the information from the property appraiser.
Yeah, and I know that you guys have had to really scramble to put these numbers together. And being on the board for 16 years, this is the first time we've had as much money increase as we've seen that it's a wonderful position to be in. But we've also got some big plans that we want to see. And I think at our last board meeting, we were talking about making sure that we allocate dollars for that lower quartile. And we come up with a strategic plan. And now we can look at how we're going to take those extra dollars and put them towards our strategic plan. And again, too, dollars one year don't mean. I remember when the property values were going up, up, up. And then guess what? The property values, we were overvalued and they went down. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a page in here that shows that. I think we have to be ready that might happen again. There's discussions that were overvalued. They might come down. So I wouldn't even want to spend all those dollars. I would want to be keeping some of those dollars in reserve or not using them for recurring dollars. But this is something that happens every year. We meet during the year and we talk about it, and we have to have a prospective budget for the coming year. And that's how we allocate the dollars to the schools, and we allocate how many, staff we need to know. And then we get to the end of the year when the legislature passes their budget, we get the property values, and then there's going to be another change that's going to happen. I think it often happens in the fall, come September, October, when we get our head counts of how many kids we really have, because guess what? Our budget for staffing may have to change. This is something that happens every year. And I've been here and I've seen these change. And you put a budget out on what you think the things are going to happen. But there's budget amendments that have to happen, but you've got to put something together ahead of time, and that's what all of our budget meetings were for. In January, March, and April, and May 10th, we had a very in-depth discussion on the budget. And I know you go back and watch those, so perhaps maybe if you went back to the the May 10th budget workshop, you can hear how we came to most of the numbers in this budget. The numbers that we don't have is what she's explaining right now, are these increased dollars that are, above some of them were expected, but where we're at now, and then, we're going to talk about them, I believe, in August on where we want to see these dollars spent. And I think that'll be a good discussion, but it's not a discussion we could have had prior because we didn't have those numbers prior. But it doesn't matter. The law says we have to advertise our proposed budget right now. I mean, that's it. We got to vote on it. We got to put it out there. But I don't think regardless, those numbers aren't going to change. The legislature tells us what our required local effort is.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not a board member that's been here for 8 years or longer, so, and my fiduciary responsibility is equal to every one of yours that sit here. So I honestly feel that I have been working on the existing budget, the year-end budget, and the tentative budget since I've been here. So I appreciate that. Unfortunately, you got it, I think, at 1:15 because I was waiting as anxiously as you were, 1:15 on the 19th. So, and since I've gotten it, I've really gone through, and I have a whole bunch of questions, but I don't think tonight is the night for talking about what the questions are because it's really the millage rates are the millage rates, and they are what they are. Frankly, we just went through a referendum, and we could have discussed the millage rates for the referendum knowing that the property taxes were going to be so high then. I was anticipating that, and I came prepared to a board meeting anticipating that that would be a board discussion. No one brought it up. So I've prepared, I've prepped, and so I think it's a little discourteous to your fellow board members and frankly to the public to say it's a misrepresentation, or I forget your exact word, of a disservice to the public and to our staff, because I appreciate how hard you've done what you've done to get here. And so what I'm also hearing is that what we need to talk about are some appropriations, which we would be talking about frankly, all year long. And this year, what's really extraordinary is that we have ESSER dollar appropriations, we have referendum dollar appropriations, and we have an increased budget because of the property values that are good. So we're going to be talking about that hopefully at every board meeting. And honestly, I have been talking about the lowest quartile since I got here. And from a board conversation, it was brought up the first time as a board but I have those conversations all the time with the superintendent. And when you, Mrs. Rose, brought up community schools, I've been working on that concept since I've got here. So that when we're ready to execute to that point, I'm going to have ideas and suggestions about how to have a community school. So I think I just want to make sure that the public does not get alarmed. This is standard operating procedure. I wish we had more time. I wish that would have been my goal too, but it is what it is, and the discussions will take place, and we have until September 13th.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Asplin.
Yes, thank you. Speaking of the lowest quartile, I just want to make sure everybody understands this isn't the first time that we are just looking at the lowest quartile. We've been doing it all along. I know we've had discussions about how to help our students with lowest quartile. We've hired many, many teachers over the last 2 years to help in the lowest quartile. This is just a possibility of even adding more, because I don't think you can have too many teachers helping our students in the lowest quartile. But it is a good conversation to have. As far as the RLE, the 3.024 mils, Ms. Penner, when the calculation comes in, if you can remind us, when does that come in as far as whether they're going to keep it the same, raise it, or lower the RLE?
Well, as we said, the second calculation, there's a budget that's developed by the legislature, so that happens sometimes in March. And again, that's based on anticipated property values. But then again, when the property values are certified, which the property appraiser is required to do that on July 1st, but I think there are some that do it a little bit later. So once all those have been certified, that's when DOE does their calculation and submits the second calculation. They're required to have that to us no later than July 19th. And this year they got it to us just after lunch on July 19th.
So the RLE came in on the 19th.
Yes, sir.
Because we don't know what that's going to be, which was actually 12% lower than we thought it was on the 18th.
Yes.
Yes, that's a lot of money. And so we don't really know until the 19th exactly what we're going to have. The other thing is the 1.5 mils on the capital outlay. I know that is something that used to be 2 mils a while back, and then it dropped back to 1.5. I don't know of any district that goes below 1.5. But we're about to build 3 schools and rebuild a 4th school and another one, all in the next 5 years. We're going to have to borrow over $300 million, and I would recommend that we do not lower the 1.5 mils in capital outlay if that's what the question has been.
Mrs. Ziegler.
Well, I just want to respond to a couple of things. So I am very familiar with the process, and I do know when we spoke last time, and that's why I went through a historical standpoint. Again, this is not, I understand the challenges that our finance department always has to go through, and they do. It's an art. It's an art, and I thank you for what you guys do. And I know it's always a last-minute thing, but there is always a ongoing conversation, which, yes, we've had to a certain level, but not to the depth. So when we get to this point, there's a much deeper aspect of conversation when it goes to the budget, maybe not even a conversation, but as far as materials that are presented to us that go deeper than just high executive summary. And that is, for anyone's watching, that is a difference aspect where I found especially. And Mr. Edwards brought up something, and I'm very proud that you want to highlight all the things that you've brought up, and I think that's wonderful. I know many of us have said that. I'm not trying to take credit for anything, so I don't know why that needed to be addressed the way it was. But when it came down to, but something you said was we have an unusual moment where we have ESSER funds and we have the increased property valuation. We had, obviously, the renewal of the referendum. My point is, as a taxing authority, we are putting out our recommendations of the proposed taxes. 2 of those are absolutely discretionary. So I know this first came up with the increased property values was when we had to discuss whether or not we were going to levy impact fees. I know there are people in this audience that I spoke with as members of staff, but we had no kind of calculation of what kind of revenue that would be looking at. I made a basic guess, but that is where I just want to make it clear that it's a little unusual to make a recommendation on what we want to levy, especially when we're just now getting the numbers, what that variances are, and they are substantial. And as was said at the beginning, perhaps this maybe be a little earlier or not. I don't know that. I think we have to take our responsibility as this point in this moment when we do the taxing aspect of it and we approve those rates. It's unusual to go back and change them. So I'm not trying to discourage anyone, but I do think it's important, and this is unusual, that there is a certain level of depth that we typically have that I do not think is supported. But I will stop at that because I know we have additional items to address.
Mrs. Brown.
As a former legislator who followed the budget process very closely, and we can see when those dollars and how the budget is calculated. And there, you've got a sheet in here how they calculate it. But when the legislature is calculating what the budget is, they calculate the budget as if the districts are calculating, are levying their total amount that they can levy. It's in there at 0.748. In fact, they take and say, well, this is what the districts, can get at 7.748, and we're going to average that out to make sure that those districts that don't have the high property values that some others, that they get it. So they equalize that 0.748 with the anticipation that we do that. And the same thing with these capital dollars. They take, and when they're doing their education budget, when they're bringing these numbers down, these numbers are calculated from Tallahassee with the expectation that we take advantage and that we do levy the dollars that are approved by the legislature, which is the required local effort, the discretionary millage. We've got the voting millage. I don't think if we went and asked the voters, well, do you want us to reduce that millage now? No, they didn't say that. And I think we need to and remember back to when those property values fell just as quickly as they went up. They went down. So I don't think we should be thinking about this as all, but I do know that when the legislature does their budget, they do that budget based on the districts levying the full amount that we can levy.
All right. I think we're at the end of the questions. I just want to say to the finance department and those that were involved in these late days or nights, thank you. Thank you for the work that you've done, because you certainly had to do it quickly. The budget book looks great. I look forward to delving into it more in the next couple of weeks. And I just want to say again, I know you have had some sickness in the department, and we wish those well who are still out sick. And just thank you very much. I know you're still new in this, and we love you, and we love having you, Bonnie. So
Thank you, and I'll pass your words along to my staff.
Please.
They'll appreciate it.
please, thank you. And the next item is the hearing of citizens. I have no cards. There are none here, so at this point in time, I'm going to move to item number 3, which is the acceptance of the proposed millage rates for advertising.
I move that the following proposed millage rates for the 2022 be accepted for advertising in accordance with the requirements of Chapter 200.065 of Florida statutes. The general voted 1.0 mils. The operating general local 3.024. The required local effort 0.748.
Excuse me, that was required.
I did that wrong. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. The general voted operating is 1.0. The local required effort is 3.024. Local discretionary is 0.748, and capital outlay is 1.5. Total millage of 6.72 mils, which is
Say
0.438
that
mils
again,
less.
please. Say the total again, please.
The total millage is 6.272 mils.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? We're going to vote verbally because our machine is not working. So we'll start with Mrs. Rose and move around the dais.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
So the motion carries 4-1 with Mrs. Ziegler dissent. We'll move on to item number 4, which is to review and approve of the tentative budget for advertising.
I move that the tentative budget for 2022-2023 be approved for advertising as displayed in the enclosures with the.
And those are 3 sheets that we all had separately that will be in the advertisement in the Herald Tribune on Saturday. Second? Any comment? Otherwise, start with Mrs. Brown. And Mrs. Brown, would you please signify by saying aye if you approve?
Aye.
No.
Aye.
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 Motion carries 4-1 with Mrs. Ziegler's dissent. The next public hearing, and that will be a hearing to adopt the tentative millage and budget meeting, is scheduled for Tuesday, July the 26th at a time certain of 5:15 p.m. We will also have a couple of items from action items that will also be placed on that board agenda at the end of discussion of the tentative millage and budget portion of that meeting. If there are no other items, we're adjourned.